Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents Straightening My Crown, Conquering My Royal Mistakes by Mackenzie Douthit Mckee, narrated by Mackenzie Douthit Mckee. To my mom, thank you for walking this earth as a perfect example of love, grace, passion, hope, and integrity. Everything I am today is because of the life lessons you taught me and the examples you set. To my dad, thank you for showing me what being truly loved looks like. You are so full of strength, and it amazes me daily. You love your wife and kids more than any man I know. You are my superhero. To my siblings, Whitney, Kaylee, Zeke, and Mike, who are full of grace and love. To my grandma Jane, who traveled the country to watch me compete and has always been a huge cheerleader in my life. To Kayla for walking through every season of life with me. To my kids, Gannon, Jaxie, and Bronx for being my blessings and saving grace. And to Josh for being my best friend. Introduction. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways submit to him, and he will make your paths straight. Proverbs 3:5-6. When I was first approached about writing this book, I had major reservations. I didn't know if I was ready to go through with it while taking care of my 3 kids, making an out-of-state move, and juggling 2 businesses of my own. Where could I possibly find the time to write a book? Not only was time an issue, but I was also figuring out how to crawl out of a dark place. I was depressed and anxious, and everything was catching up to me at the same time. My mom's death and some very public marital issues were splashed across the internet and tabloids, and it was all playing out on TV. I couldn't see the light at the end because I was stuck smack dab in the middle of that deep tunnel. Everyone had an opinion about me, my life, and the choices I had made, and they all seemed to believe every lie that was on the internet about me. Ever since I can remember, I seemed to make the wrong choices in life before learning to make better ones. Being diagnosed with ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, and type 1 diabetes only complicated things more. However, I come from a very level-headed, amazing family. They were loved and respected by everyone around them and were active members of our community and church. My siblings saved themselves for marriage while I got pregnant at 16. Even though it was hard to compare myself to them, I was thankful for the good examples they set for me, and no matter what, I knew they always had my back. I truly come from an amazing family. I was also worried that with all my recent personal turmoil, my story wouldn't have a happy ending, and I felt that you and I deserved a happy ending. I've never learned things the easy way, and I often think about how my mom said I was just wired differently than my siblings. She made me realize, too, that being different is nothing to be ashamed of. She used to tell me that it was okay to stumble and fall now and then as long as I got back up. And if my crown falls off in the process, I need to pick it up, straighten it, and stand a little taller next time. Every time it slips and falls, it holds more value as I fix it and put it back on. My mom loved all kinds of women's empowerment quotes, and she would frequently tell my sisters and me to keep our chins up so our crowns wouldn't fall off. She wanted us to know our true worth and never to be ashamed of who we are. There have been countless times my crown has been crooked, and it's still a little crooked right now. Nobody's perfect, and we are all more alike than we know. But if I can learn from and conquer my mistakes, and I've made some royal ones, believe me, anyone can. You might even notice that my cover photo is far from perfect, but it was important for me to show myself as I truly am, with minimal makeup and straightening my crown while a wave washes over me. My sister Whitney is a photographer, and she was willing at 8 months pregnant to get into the freezing water with me to catch the perfectly imperfect, unretouched shot. I love her and the photo she captured for showing the real me. I've experienced amazing growth throughout my life. I could wait forever for the right time to write a book. But then it occurred to me that most of the important events in my life didn't happen at what most people would call the right time. But I also know my ups and downs have taught me to persevere and stay strong. And most importantly, they've taught me who I am. I hope that sharing my mistakes and what I've learned might help others straighten their crowns too. We all just have to believe in ourselves and trust that our paths may be a little different from the paths of others and that everything will happen according to God's plan. His plan isn't always the same as our own, but it is far bigger and better than anything we could ever imagine. It's up to us to be willing to stop, listen, and seek what His plan has in store for us. Since I always learn the hard way, maybe this was the perfect time to tell my story. After all, I'd have to straighten my own crown first before I could help others straighten theirs. Even though my relationship with God is an important part of who I am and what I believe, and I talk a lot about His love in this book, I want people to know that I never judge others for having beliefs that differ from my own. His grace is just too influential to who I am to ignore that part of my life. The Bible verses I've included have helped me through tough times, so I wanted to share them with others. And about that happy ending, it might not arrive at the perfect time or in the easiest way, but I know my happy ending is coming. I'm forging ahead on whatever path I need to take to get there, and I'm ready to face any challenges head first with my crown held high. Chapter 1. The Tough Talk. But to each one of us grace has been given as Christ apportioned it. Ephesians 4:7. I was sitting in my room after school, waiting for my mom to get home. I just put the finishing touches on redecorating my walls with the latest posters from my favorite celebrity magazines. Like most 16-year-olds, I loved plastering the walls of my bedroom from top to bottom with posters of actors and actresses and music stars to jazz up my room and make me feel cool. One thing I always knew I got from my mom was my love for interior decorating. And since my house was where all my cheerleader friends hung out after school and had sleepovers, I had to make sure my bedroom always looked perfect. But this particular day, it was just me, and I knew for sure that although Beyonce and Hilary Duff were staring back at me from the wall, they certainly weren't going to back me up when I told my mom the secret I was hiding. I had a feeling this might not go well. I heard the doorknob click as she came into my room. This was it. I couldn't hold anything back now. My decision had already been made. "Mom, sit down. I have to talk to you," I said, nervously tapping my feet. I've always had so much energy that it is impossible for me to sit still, and that was especially true at that moment. As my mom sat down on my bed beside me, I told myself to take a deep breath and just let it out. Now was the time to speak. She was a very wise, involved mom and could always read me like a book. So I could tell by the look on her face that she knew it was not going to be good. "Mom, I'm pregnant." For a few seconds, my mom just stared at me. Her posture slumped and she seemed to melt into the bed. She said nothing. I was desperate to hear her say something, anything. But she didn't, not right away. I'm sure it was only a moment of silence, but it seemed like an eternity. She just stood up and stared at my new posters. My mom would always think about things before she did them, and it was so rare to see my mom snap that I didn't expect her to snap now. I had never even heard her swear. The closest she ever got to losing her temper happened one time in middle school. She said the word freaking when she was dropping me off at a school dance and had her final straw of my back talking. It's the worst word I'd ever heard her say. She said, "You're being freaking pathetic," as I got out of the car. It took her days to forgive herself for saying that to me, even when I assured her that my friends' moms cussed all the time. And now, even though the blank look on her face showed she was clearly in shock, I was positive that she would keep calm. Boy, was I wrong. Standing up slowly, she turned her gaze to my poster wall. Britney Spears smiling down at her seemed to set her off. She started ripping my posters off the wall and throwing them on the ground. I had never seen her this infuriated before. She didn't stop until every single one was crumpled on my bedroom floor. She walked out of the room and in walked my dad. I knew she hadn't told him, so it would be up to me to share the news with my precious, gentle, loving father. To this day, it's the hardest thing I've ever had to tell him. Upon hearing my confession, we sat together crying. Finally, after a few hours with my dad, my mom came back into my room. When she regained her composure, she started asking questions. Mackenzie, where did I go wrong? I've had 4 kids and raised you all the same way. How did this happen? I glanced over my shoulder and saw my reflection in the mirror. As I exhaled the breath I had been holding, I could feel the hot sensation of shame spreading throughout my body. I knew I had failed my mom, just like I had failed myself as a small child when I couldn't protect myself from trouble. Now I was failing as a teenager and feeling my dreams slip through my fingers. My mom and I had spent my whole childhood since the age of 4 traveling all around the country for all-star cheer lessons and competitions. My family didn't have much money and she had sacrificed so much for me because she just knew I was going somewhere with my life. And here I was. I had ruined everything. Not waiting for any answers, my mom walked abruptly out of my room. Unsettled by her display of rage, I grabbed a few things and went to my boyfriend's house to escape the pain at home. Within an hour, she ended up texting me, Mackenzie, I'm sorry. It was wrong for me to act that way. I will always love you no matter what. I let out a sigh of relief knowing that she seemed to be back on my side, but I still couldn't figure out how to slow my heart rate down. I swear I could see my heart pumping out of my chest. I went back home and went to bed knowing there would be plenty more to figure out the next day. All night, I tried to make sense of my mom's reaction. Maybe she ripped my posters because they were a symbol of how I had always tried to fit in with the popular crowd. She already knew that I had lost my virginity not long before and had also warned me about some of the friends I was choosing to hang around. Then one of those friends ratted me out to my mom, telling her that I was sleeping with my then boyfriend. Looking for any sign that my friend was right, my mom went digging in my dresser drawers and found the birth control pills I had gotten by sneaking behind her back. When I got home from school on the day she found them, she said one of the most hurtful things that she'd ever said to me. You're not my baby girl anymore. It crushed me. My mom forbade me from staying on birth control after she found out I was sexually active because in her mind, that was just giving me permission to have more sex. I guess she just trusted that I wouldn't sleep with my next boyfriend either because she never brought up the topic and must have thought that I had learned my lesson when she caught me before. After that, I started rebelling. It is this season of life I wish I could go back and redo. I would listen to and respect my mom more and see that she just wanted what was best for me. Back then, I would constantly talk back to my mom, and some days when I was told no, I would scream, punch holes in the wall, and destroy my room. My siblings thought I was a spoiled brat, and they were angry at the way I was treating our mom. It's still a joke in my family that I got more spankings in one day than the other 3 of them put together ever did during their entire childhoods. I had anger problems, and my siblings didn't understand how I became the bad kid. I never understood why my parents didn't have a conversation with me about pregnancy or sex before marriage because they had experienced both as teenagers. One big difference is that my dad married my mom right away when they found out she was pregnant, and he was the only man she had ever been with or ever would be with. When they were teens, it was much more common to get married young and stay together. I also think that my mom understood that love stories like theirs were rare and special. She inspired my dad to come to God, and he loved her unconditionally for it. God seemed to have made my parents for each other, and I always thought a man would love me as my dad loved my mom. Through a lot of mistakes, I learned the hard way that not all men are like my dad. In retrospect, my mom must have seen a lot of herself in me. I believe that right then she was remembering how hard it was to tell her own parents about her pregnancy. Her parents, my grandparents, had been very involved in the church, and she too felt like she had failed them at that time in her life. As active leaders in the church, my grandparents knew this would cause heartache and gossip for their family, and they were right. People were cruel and judgmental, and after going through the pain of having others talk behind her back, there was no way my mom wanted one of her children to experience that too. Getting pregnant at 16 wasn't something I could blame on the way my mom raised me, though. Some damaging things had happened to me as a small child that ruined my self-esteem and must have contributed to the poor decisions I was making. I wasn't angry with her for those awful things. I had kept them secret for years, and she had no idea they had even happened. How was she supposed to know? I didn't even understand the extent of what had happened and how it had affected me until later in life. No, I thought that everything that had gotten me here was because I was different and doomed, unlike my siblings who didn't make the kind of mistakes I did. Like my mom, I couldn't understand why I was the only one to suffer from my bad choices, but I knew, in the end, I only had myself to blame. The next morning, my mom came into my room to talk. Reaching out to grab my hand, she still had tears in her eyes. I could tell that she, too, had not slept all night. I was only a few walls away from her, but that night, I felt like I was in another country. She was my comfort anytime I was broken, and I just wanted to talk to her. "We're going to do this. We're going to have this baby, Mckee," she said. That was the day I was certain that things would never be the same for either of us. Crowning achievement. God gave my mom a huge gift of grace. I know it was not easy for her to forgive me and face the world with a 16-year-old pregnant daughter, but she was a true example of Christ. Chapter 2. Not according to plan. "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and future." Jeremiah 19:11. I come from Miami, but not the one with the pastel colors, beaches, flamingos, and vibrant nightlife in Florida. No, I am from the Miami, pronounced Miami, in the far northeast corner of Oklahoma. The whole town is only 10 square miles and has a population under 14,000. Miami was once a booming mining town in the mid-1800s, situated on a stretch of historic Route 66 not too far away from the Missouri and Kansas borders. But now it's known more for its casinos and the fact that about 25% of its residents live in poverty, many with drug and gambling problems. My parents, Brad and Angie Douthit, were also born in the same area, my dad being just one town over in Wyandotte, Oklahoma. Their love story started in first grade when they rode the same bus to school. My dad remembers being so jealous of my mom's friends, who not only got to sit next to her on the bus, but also got to share my mom's candy. No matter how nice he was to them, they wouldn't share their candy with him, and he thought they were stuck up for not giving him some. Still, all through elementary and middle school, my dad kept trying, without luck, to catch my mom's eye. At 15, he realized he was in love with her, and somehow he convinced my mom to go on a real date. But despite his changing my mom's feelings for him, my mom's parents now were the ones who had nothing good to say about him. He just wasn't the type of boy they wanted their daughter to come home with, ever. My dad loved to party and drink with his friends, which didn't win him any points with my grandparents. When my mom realized how wild he was, she didn't want to put up with his partying lifestyle either and broke up with him. He dealt with this like a lot of young boys would, by getting even more drunk with friends every night and even showing up at her parents' doorstep. If you knew my mother's parents, you would know that is not a good idea. He was so miserable without her. He had to have his precious Angie back. Somehow, he must have worn her down because they rekindled, and from then on, they were inseparable. She was able to lead my dad to God, and she gave him a lot of grace for the mistakes he made. When she got pregnant at 18, she broke the news to her parents that she and the guy they weren't crazy about were going to be parents. They were horrified that their daughter would now be the talk of the town as an unwed mother. My mom, they believed, had fallen for this untamed guy who had won her over, and she was now carrying his child. My dad, however, knew he was going to marry my mom. As a young teenager, he told her that his love for her was forever. In fact, he was the one who talked my mom into marrying him. She borrowed a friend's dress, and they quickly planned a $20 wedding with their friends and family. It was a perfect celebration of love in their eyes. After the ceremony, my dad barely had enough money in his wallet to take my mom to a special honeymoon dinner at Red Lobster. Throughout their 34-year-long marriage, Red Lobster remained their favorite date spot. The issue of where they would live as a newlywed couple was quickly solved by my dad's father. He had 40 acres with a trailer house on it, and he let them live there as long as they agreed to help manage his farm. Soon after they moved to the farm, my oldest sister Whitney was born. While living in the trailer, my parents were broke, but my dad said that my mom never complained. That's easy to believe because I hardly ever heard her complain during the 25 years of life that I knew her. Being so poor, she would often buy just one bag of potatoes that she made go a long way by teaching herself to make different dishes. Within 2 years of married life, they were pregnant again with my sister, Kaylee. But my mom always had a huge heart, and she didn't want to stop at just 2 children. In their early 20s, after my 2 sisters were born, my parents decided that they wanted to be foster parents. My mom always had a heart for kids who needed a better home, so they began to pray about it, and God answered. After months of waiting, my mom's father called her. He worked for child welfare, and he had wonderful news for them. There was a boy who would be perfect for my parents. But there was one little catch. The boy was a 34-year-old man with Down syndrome named Mike. His mother had just died, and since he was an only child, he had no one to take care of him. He desperately wanted a family to which he could belong. But my parents wondered if it would be too difficult to adopt someone older than they were. My mom, however, had such a huge and loving heart, and she couldn't get Mike off her mind. The facility where Mike was staying allowed him to visit my family for the weekend, and my mom instantly knew that he should be a part of our family. It took some convincing to get my dad on board, as he was absolutely terrified to take on a grown man with disabilities. He and my mom were barely adults themselves, and they were barely making ends meet and living in a trailer with 2 small girls. But my mom never questioned God's plan, and she assured my dad that Mike was destined to be a part of our family. Even though it wasn't the image they had in their heads, instead of being worried about the situation, my parents were open-minded and trusted God. My mom prayed for guidance, saying, "Well, God, this certainly wasn't my plan, but it's your plan, and your plan has got to be better than my plan." With that, they moved forward with their plan to adopt Mike. They began to worry, though, that their trailer wasn't big enough for their growing family, and they didn't have money to buy a larger home. That's when pure luck struck. Mike's mom had left her house to him in her will, so now my parents and sisters could move in and live there with Mike. Having never been able to afford their own house, my parents wondered what they could have possibly done for God to give them this incredible opportunity. They immediately began building on another master suite so Mike would have a room and space to himself. When the house was ready, my family moved in, with my sisters sharing one room and my parents the other. Life with Mike was a blessing, and my parents felt so much satisfaction from their decision to adopt him. He was sweet, loving, and extremely funny. Humor just came naturally to him. He was hilarious, and he enjoyed making people laugh. One of Mike's favorite things was to be around people. At church, he eagerly listened and accepted God's word. He loved praising and worshiping God to the point that he started speaking loudly in tongues whenever he went to church. No one minded because everyone in the church was crazy about him. Even if they didn't like any of the rest of my family, they loved Mike, and Mike loved everyone back. He absolutely adored kids, so he would sometimes go to the elementary school where my dad worked, and while my dad was cleaning and doing his custodial duties around the school, little kids would come up to Mike and say hi and talk to him. To Mike, this was his version of heaven. Even though Mike loved my whole family, he was obsessed with my dad, who became his hero. He even had a nickname for my dad, Lammy Pie. We had no idea where he came up with that nickname, and I'm not sure my dad really liked it, but Lammy Pie he was. My dad was still pretty young at this time, and he had a big group of friends with whom he'd play softball. Of course, Mike was always there to watch and cheer him on. I can only imagine my dad's embarrassment when his friends laughed at him while Mike was yelling, "There he is, that's my Lammy Pie. Go, Lammy Pie, you're so cute." My dad would just put his face in his hands while everyone else enjoyed Mike's enthusiasm. And as for my mom, Mike would likely not have had such a good life after his biological mom had passed if it hadn't been for her. She loved him without reservation and let him be himself. He loved her for it and thought she was the most beautiful woman in the world, calling her Farrah Fawcett, after his favorite TV star. My mom always went out of her way to help Mike feel like he belonged, even letting him play pin the tail on the elephant instead of a donkey at birthday parties because he was such a die-hard Republican. She never told him what to believe or think, and she let him live his life how he wanted. Within 2 years of adopting Mike, my brother Zeke was born, and he was yet another happy, easygoing kid to raise, aside from some scary illnesses he went through as a baby. My mom still felt our home had room for at least one more child to love, though. She was one of those moms who could handle several kids with no stress. Pregnancy was actually enjoyable to her, and parenting came naturally, too. My parents already had 2 girls, 1 boy and 1 man, and they wanted to complete their perfect pattern with one more child they assumed would be another boy. His name would be Hunter, and he would grow to be best friends with his older brother, just like his 2 older sisters were best friends. And then, surprise! 19 months later, I was born. Not expecting a girl, my parents didn't even have a name picked out for me until after I was born. They told me different stories on how they came up with Mackenzie. My mom's version is that she liked the name Mackenzie, and while she was reading a book about Walt Disney, it dawned on her that Mickey would be a cute nickname for Mackenzie. My dad, on the other hand, tells a story of demanding that my mother drive him to McDonald's for a Big Mac while she was in labor on the way to the hospital. He insists that must have been the inspiration for Mackenzie. Funny enough, my friends in school always called me Big Mac as a nickname without knowing the story, and many of my newer friends just call me Mac. My family still calls me Mickey to this day. Personally, I've always liked calling myself Kenzie, but at work, I introduce myself as Coach Mac. I like to believe that I have so many nicknames because I'm multifaceted and there's more to me than meets the eye. Each name helps me sparkle from a different angle. I was the baby who screamed and screamed, and if I wasn't screaming, I was nursing. I was always told I came out screaming and never stopped. When I was born, the doctors were set to tie my mom's tubes, but she wasn't sure she was ready to be done yet. However, after 3 solid months of no sleep, my mom knew she was done having children. She always told me, "There's a reason you were my last. You are a handful." One day, my dad came home from work, and without telling him where they were going, she whisked him into her minivan. He saw in her eyes that she was exhausted to no end and didn't ask questions about where they were going. The next thing you know, they were at the doctor's office scheduling him for a vasectomy. Even though she was through having kids, my mom didn't want me to grow up since I was the last one. She wanted to baby me and keep me little for as long as possible, which made it easy for me to get away with murder. I could scream and throw fits, and my mom wouldn't tell me no. My siblings saw this and deemed me as a strong-willed, spoiled brat, and I don't blame them. Even though I wasn't the boy my parents had planned, my brother and I were close. To fit in with Zeke, I learned to play rough. My blonde hair was always tangled in snarls, and my face was constantly dirty from playing outside. Thankfully, my mom was easygoing about having a lively girl. If I went to church without shoes, which I did several times, she didn't care. Life was too short in her eyes to stress over silly shoes. She refused to subscribe to the stereotype that girls had to wear frilly dresses and pink bows. She let me be me, whoever I was. Over the years, I've spent a lot of time looking in the mirror and wondering why I'm not more like my siblings. I'm slowly beginning to accept my differences and learn that it's okay to take your own path in life. My mom taught me that things won't always go according to our plan, but they always go according to.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?